there's a deeply contradictory paradox happening right within the heart of America, where the nation can spend billions of dollars to support other countries, but can't provide its own residents with proper housing. And nowhere reflects that more clearly than Manhattan. Once a symbol of prosperity and opportunity, a place that was once the dream of millions, Manhattan is now facing a grim reality that no one could have foreseen. The brightly lit streets and magnificent skyscrapers are now occupied by tents that take over the sidewalks, and residents are forced to live in conditions worse than during wartime, right in the wealthiest part of the city. In today's video, we'll delve into the horrifying truth of Manhattan, where the American dream is now just an illusion crushed under the shadow of poverty and neglect. For those who have seen Home Alone 2, you'll surely remember the image of young Kevin lost in the dazzling Manhattan, where Christmas lights blanket the avenue's skyscrapers reach for the sky as if touching a dream, and the entire city seems to step out of a fairy tale. That was once Manhattan, in the memory of millions, a vibrant symbol of a prosperous, magical and promising America. But by 2025, that picture had changed. The heart of New York is no longer just about light and luxury. Manhattan is gradually revealing deep cracks where tents are sprouting on sidewalks, the homeless are huddled in subway stations, and poverty is no longer hidden, but has become part of the urban landscape. Things that seem absurd in one of the wealthiest places in America are gradually becoming normalized as if they were commonplace. In May 2025, New York recorded over 350,000 people without stable housing enough to fill Yankee Stadium 6 times over. Among them, Manhattan saw the highest concentration, with tens of thousands each night crammed into shelters, parks, subway cars, old apartment hallways, or if they're lucky, someone's couch, assuming there's still someone willing to help. The Midtown Hell's Kitchen and Lower Manhattan areas saw the most sweeps of homeless people in the city. In District 3 alone, over 11,000 people have been relocated under the guise of ensuring public safety. But where do those cleanups take them? Very few people are actually admitted to shelters, as these places are overcrowded. Many centers have become dangerous due to violence, mental health issues, and constant tension among people who have nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, hundreds of abandoned buildings remain empty, while thousands of people line up from afternoon, just hoping to find a place to sleep. Hours-long procedures cause many people to give up, return to the sidewalks, or escape into the subway to find a peaceful night underground. Manhattan was once a dream. Now it resembles a post-war stage, brightly lit but lacking soul. The city is gradually losing the very people who built it. If a city like Manhattan, wealthy, modern, and once full of opportunity, can no longer protect its most vulnerable residents, what does America have left for future generations? Amidst the lights of financial towers, where every square meter of land is valued at tens of thousands of dollars, are strips of wrinkled fabric castles temporarily stretched across the sidewalks, places that people are forced to call home. Stepping onto the vibrant streets of Manhattan in 2025, you will no longer see bustling pedestrian streets, bustling areas, luxurious hotels or skyscrapers illuminating the night sky. Instead, it's a horrifying sight that residents of Manhattan face every day. Tents erected along the sidewalks stacked like slums, where the homeless from young to old struggle to survive in conditions worse than apocalyptic. Amidst this urban economy, rental prices have turned Manhattan into an island reserved for the elite. The city no longer has room for the working class. Those who serve in restaurants, sell goods in high-end boutiques, drive delivery trucks, or clean the hallways of luxury hotels. They are the people who keep Manhattan running every day, yet they can't afford to live in the very city they serve. They work in luxurious buildings in high-end shopping districts, but they themselves cannot afford a roof over their heads. But instead of directly addressing the root causes of the homelessness crisis, the New York City government chose a seemingly neater solution, clearing tent encampments and pushing these unfortunate people out of public view. The city government introduced a new model called Safe Haven, a smaller type of shelter compared to traditional shelters, offering additional on-site medical and mental health services. In theory, this is a noteworthy step forward. But in reality, the first safe haven in the Bronx only had 80 beds, while across the city, about 2,000 people had to sleep outdoors every night, not to mention nearly 80,000 others living in overcrowded shelters. The new beds are like a drop in the ocean, not enough to make a meaningful difference. Coalition for the Homeless, one of the city's largest homeless advocacy organizations, has spoken out against this enforcement campaign. They argue that clearing the camps only deprives the homeless of their only temporary shelter, pushes them away from essential support services, and increases the risk of disease outbreaks due to constant movement and living in unsanitary conditions, which is completely contrary to CDC recommendations. Manhattan is now not just a city of skyscrapers or glittering commercial avenues, but also a clear reflection of the deep divisions within modern American society. Amidst the luxurious shops were tents. Mixed among the crowd of people in suits were nameless residents with no address and no clear future. And amidst the "Live Your Luxury" advertising posters were the tired eyes of people who just hope to survive a cold night without being chased away. When the city can no longer protect the most vulnerable, when laws and policies cannot bring justice for all, will the dreams of a just and humane society still exist in the future? Can Manhattan, with all its prosperity and luxury, still maintain its image as a city where everyone has the opportunity to live and thrive? Manhattan, a city once known for its bustling energy and as a symbol of success, is now facing profound transformation. Familiar neighborhoods are gradually becoming ghost towns, places no one dares to enter, where there is no longer a sense of safety and where an unsettling silence prevails. Areas within the city, once hailed as the economic and cultural center, have now become remote lands shrouded in the darkness of abandonment and deprivation. The once bustling streets are now only haunted by the ghosts of the homeless areas overrun by crime and the absence of government. Times Square, a global icon of Manhattan, where the light from billboards and the constant flow of people once defined New York, no longer retains its former brightness and dynamism. Rising crime, the open operation of criminal gangs, and the presence of countless homeless people in this area have made many people feel anxious every time they step foot here. Neighborhoods like Chinatown and Soho, once essential for tourists, are now facing surprisingly deserted conditions with no one passing through after sunset. The problem is further exacerbated by the fact that these areas are not only deserted due to the decline in tourists, but also because the city's own residents, workers, families, and even entrepreneurs have begun to leave Manhattan. Soaring rent prices, exorbitant living costs, and uncontrolled crime have left many people with no choice but to seek alternative places to live. Areas that were once centers of prosperity are now abandoned neighborhoods where shops are closed, buildings are deserted, and desolation pervades every corner. When these neighborhoods become ghost towns, it's not just a material loss, but also a spiritual one. Manhattan residents now face the dichotomy between the prosperous city they once knew and a divided one where faith in fairness and safety is slowly fading. The homeless criminal gangs and decaying infrastructure are unavoidable images in the current picture of Manhattan, where no one feels truly safe walking through the once glorious streets. Can we continue to let a city that the whole world once admired become a ghost town? A place where no one dares to enter, and there is no longer any faith in the future? The big question is, can Manhattan regain its image, or will it forever remain in the shadow of abandonment and social division? Looking at the streets of Manhattan today, it's impossible not to notice a stark division between wealthy areas and those mired in poverty, between skyscrapers and makeshift shacks. This is not just an economic divide, but a social one, where invisible battle lines are drawn beneath the streets, and these lines are becoming increasingly deep. While the streets were brightly lit by the lights of luxury stores, high-end restaurants, and corporate offices, other areas of the city were shrouded in darkness. The homeless living under bridges, in makeshift camps, or on sidewalks near commercial centers form hidden battle lines within the city itself. These battle lines are not a war between the powerful and the vulnerable, but a fight for life, for space, and for the right to exist in a city that no longer has room for those left behind. Beneath the city streets, the homeless and criminal gangs form distinct areas, each group occupying a portion of the space. These areas became their territories, where all activities were controlled by unseen forces. Gangs, the homeless, and sometimes the indifference of the authorities. The homeless not only face the risk of crime, but also endure discrimination and prejudice from the very society in which they are trying to survive. They are people living on the margins, not only excluded from prosperous areas, but also viewed by society as invisible shadows. In areas like Chinatown, Soho, or streets near Times Square, roads that were once bustling and full of people have now become places of fatigue, anxiety, and a sense of unease. Aid organizations and communities are still trying to help, but these efforts are not enough to address the stark division between social classes. Instead of being part of the community, the homeless are fighting every day to find life, to protect themselves from violence and poverty. This situation not only creates physical barriers, but also psychological ones. These abandoned areas gradually became places no one wanted to go near, because they were filled with filth, danger, and uncertainty. Although the authorities have launched cleanup campaigns, from demolishing makeshift camps to removing tents, these issues have only been addressed temporarily without a long-term strategy to help those living in destitution. The battle lines under the streets are a stark reminder of the growing polarization in society. They are not just spatial divisions, but also divisions in opportunity, fairness, and humanity. When we don't act to narrow these battle lines, can we truly call ourselves a just and humane society? This question is not just for today, but for the future. And it will determine whether Manhattan and other cities can uphold the dream of an equitable and just society. In a city like Manhattan, where everything has a price, survival is not a given, but a constant struggle. For the homeless, the highest price is existing in a society where everything is measured by money and power. To survive, they have to pay the price of loss, losing their most basic human rights: shelter, safety, respect, and the opportunity to change their lives. Today, the cost of living in Manhattan has become unaffordable for a large segment of the population. The average rent in Manhattan ranges from $4,000 to $5,000 per month for a one-bedroom apartment, while the average monthly income of a full-time worker in New York is only around $3,200 to $3,500 before taxes. This means that even if you have a stable job, you could still be pushed out of your home at any time without effective housing and social care support policies. With this situation, not only the poor, but even the middle class are paying a high price for survival. Many people who previously believed they were safe with a stable job and a modest home are now struggling to pay monthly rent, living on credit cards, and fearing that an event like illness or job loss could push them into homelessness. Rising costs have reduced the middle class's ability to save and prepare for the future, leaving them increasingly at risk of losing everything. Like a door that seems to open wide, but is actually closing inch by inch. Each new apartment building that springs up is an opportunity lost for those who have lived here for decades. And the high price isn't just the cost of each apartment or monthly living expenses, but the loss of faith in the very dream of this city. Why is a city that once prided itself on its humanity gradually becoming inaccessible to the very people who built it? The shelter system, an important part of efforts to support the homeless, was expected to provide protection and care for those without housing. However, the truth was not what was expected. Although these shelters play an important role in alleviating emergencies, they cannot solve the underlying problems of homelessness. These facilities not only lack space and services, but also flexibility to meet the diverse needs of those who need shelter. The shortage isn't just about the number of beds, but also about the quality of support services. Many homeless shelters lack adequate medical care, especially mental health support services, a crucial factor for the homeless, particularly those who have experienced psychological trauma from life on the streets. These centres also lack vocational training or employment support programs, which are crucial for helping the homeless reintegrate into society. Furthermore, living conditions in shelters are not always guaranteed. Limited space, a lack of basic amenities, and a sense of insecurity in some facilities make many homeless people feel disrespected and without rights. So, as current temporary housing systems still fail to meet the actual needs of the homeless, the question arises, can we continue to accept these temporary solutions, or is it time for us to confront a more comprehensive strategy where everyone, regardless of their circumstances, can find opportunities to change their lives? While government policies remain ineffective and fail to fully address homelessness, the community and volunteers have become crucial factors in providing direct support and creating small but meaningful changes for the homeless. It is the empathy and willingness to act of these individual and group volunteers that has helped to alleviate the suffering of those left behind in society. Volunteer organisations not only provide material support, but also play a crucial role in connecting the homeless with opportunities for social reintegration. By organising skills training programs and providing job search assistance, these organisations are creating real opportunities for the homeless to get back on their feet and start their lives over. Vocational training programs that help the homeless learn basic skills and find employment are one of the key factors in helping them break the cycle of poverty. However, the role of the community and volunteers goes beyond simply providing direct services. They are also people who speak out to defend the rights of the homeless and call for changes in public policies. They are the bridge between the forgotten and society, helping the homeless not be forgotten in the shadows. They not only provided material assistance, but also conveyed a powerful message of compassion and humanity within the community. However, while the work of organisations and volunteers is incredibly important, without strong government support and long-term policies, these efforts will only be temporary and will not address the root of the problem. The community can help, but it cannot replace the government's responsibility to create sustainable solutions for the homeless. Can we continue to rely on these volunteer efforts without changing systemic policies? Or is it time for a fundamental shift from the government to provide long-term support for the homeless? The community and volunteers are an indispensable source of motivation, but to truly change the lives of the homeless, cooperation is needed between social organisations and the government, so that they not only receive help, but also have the opportunity to rise above the very difficulties they are facing. Although volunteer and community organisations have played a significant role in supporting the homeless, these efforts can only provide temporary solutions without strong and decisive intervention from the government. The governments of major cities like New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco have begun implementing strategies and reforms in an effort to address homelessness. But these steps are still insufficient to completely overcome the issue, especially in the context of the faster rate of decline in urban life compared to the system's ability to respond. An important factor in reform efforts is affordable housing policy. Although the government has taken some measures to boost the construction of affordable housing, such as New York City Mayor Eric Adams' Get Stuff Built plan, these projects are not sufficient to meet the actual demand. Both the government and real estate developers face difficulties in finding investment funds, land, and dealing with rising construction costs. At the same time, they also had to face subtle opposition from the upper classes, those who didn't want social housing projects springing up next to where they lived. Additionally, the lack of ongoing support for the homeless after they are placed in shelters is a major issue. The mental health care system is still not strong enough to cope with people suffering from long-term trauma, both psychological and physical. These individuals frequently struggle with depression, anxiety disorders, mild schizophrenia, or the consequences of prolonged stimulant abuse. While shelters can provide overnight accommodation, the absence of mental health treatment programs, vocational training, and administrative support makes it difficult for them to reintegrate into society in a meaningful way. That's why many people return to the streets just weeks after receiving initial support. Another serious issue is the stagnation in the planning and development of social housing. Despite commitments from the government, the process of obtaining building permits for affordable housing still faces administrative, paperwork, planning, and legal barriers. Many temporary housing projects had to be stopped simply because of a protest meeting from the neighboring residential area, or were delayed for months just to get a minor technical change approved. This means the demand for low-income housing isn't being met in a timely manner. And what happens when someone has nowhere to live? They sleep on the street. And when there are enough people sleeping on the streets, a tent city forms. However, some positive signs should also be acknowledged. The city has implemented the safe haven model, providing beds and psychological services for high-risk homeless individuals. Expanded street outreach, volunteer teams directly approaching homeless people at encampments, and piloted several multifunctional support centres capable of issuing temporary IDs, connecting with Medicaid, and assisting with unemployment benefits or housing applications. But everything is still too small compared to the scale of the crisis. And at the current rate, those in urgent need cannot wait many more years to receive a 10-year plan. To truly change this situation, policies need not only to be more, but also faster, more flexible, and more humane. The government cannot simply manage homelessness with numbers. They need to build a comprehensive support ecosystem, from healthcare, legal aid, temporary housing, to long-term resettlement and suitable employment. It's necessary to abandon the move to make it tidy mindset. Instead, rebuild from the ground up, so that vulnerable people have the opportunity to stand firm in a city that is becoming increasingly expensive, demanding, and cold. Can the government implement real reforms, not just to address homelessness in the short term, but also to solve the long-term problem and build a more just society for everyone? The issue of homelessness in Manhattan and major cities across the United States is not just a problem for individuals facing poverty and deprivation. This is an issue that reflects deep social divisions, shortcomings in public policies, and community responsibility. From the fabric castles in the heart of Manhattan to forgotten neighborhoods, we are witnessing the failure of a system that was supposed to protect all people in this society. Are we ready to face the issue head-on and take action to build a society where no one is marginalized, where everyone has the opportunity to start their life anew? How we treat the homeless will determine the future of a society we are proud to call our own. Only when we truly care for the vulnerable can society move towards a sustainable and just future. If what you just watched resonated with you in any way, please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to, but everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands, one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organization, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images, and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or stereotyping. We do not condone any illegal behavior whatsoever. We do not normalize suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion, but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.